That's about it. I'm going to save up the National Day of Reason stuff, and we'll talk more about that next week, because Tracie's got a lot of stuff we want to get to today. So.
Okay. Well, before I get started, I just want to mention that today, Sunday, March 18th, 2007, on the front of the Austin American-Statesman's Metro and State section, there's a write-up. I don't know if you can get this or not, but Matt actually got, I guess, an interview and an informational article.
Yeah, they came down last week during the show.
Yeah.
Hey, that's about as blurry as we can get.
Yeah. And just about Matt and the ACA and the goals, the group goals, and also, you know, Matt personally a little bit, and just was kind of surprising to see a positive atheist article on the front page of a local section. It also extends on to B7 and got a pretty big write-up, and so
yeah, I was pleased with it overall. But, it would have been nice if they'd have mentioned the time of the show so that more people could tune in and maybe ask questions and have discussions and things like that.
But it's kind of a rare event. So if you have a paper from today's paper and you want to check that out, that's something that you can look at today.
Cool.
Okay. For the topic today, we get a lot of questions. I would say that almost every time I've been on, there have been questions. Someone has called and said, you've mentioned that you believed in God before. Right. Specifically, they seem to ask you this question because you were studying to become a preacher. And they'll ask, how could you go from being a Christian to being a non-believer? Like, how did you become an atheist? Right. If you were studying, and what happened?
And I got that question this morning as soon as the article came out.
That's funny.
Believe it or not. First email of the day. Well, actually, it was a little more specific than that. The first email of the day was, why are you so angry at God? What was it that made you angry at God so that you're not a Christian anymore? Well,
part of the reason that I wanted to address this topic is because there's a large disconnect between, and I would say that there are a lot of, not all atheists, but there are a lot of atheists, or at least there are a group of atheists, who used to be Christians and then became atheists. And it seems interesting because when you talk to this particular group of atheists, a lot of times they're extremely well read. You get a lot of, people that were studying for seminary, people that were studying to become ministers, people that were highly involved in their church. Generally, the story is the same, that they started to study more and more about what they believed in an effort to actually preach better, or to, understand more what it is they actually thought about God, or they wanted to study their Bible. They wanted to look at what they believe and believe it in a better, more understanding way, and they end up becoming atheists. Now, this, of course, is not to say that everyone who does this becomes an atheist, but the gamut of ex-Christian atheists do seem to follow that pattern. Whereas, when I was a believer, and I think when many now atheists, ex-Christians turned atheists were believers, and many Christians who are still Christians have an idea of why a person becomes an atheist that is highly disconnected from the reality of why people that are Christians become atheists. The Christian idea of why that occurs is generally not the reason that an atheist would give you if you asked, why did you become an atheist?
Like the guy who wrote this morning and say, why, what was that incident that made you so angry with God that you couldn't be a Christian anymore? And my answer was, as it has been the 15,000 times I've asked. By the way, this week marks the 2-year point of me actually being involved with the show. So over the course of those 2 years, I've answered this question a bunch of times, and there's nothing that made me angry with God. I didn't have any bad dealings with the church. I wasn't abused. I didn't suffer tragic personal tragedy. Tragic tragedy. Those are good. Those are the really good ones. Nothing bad happened, and there was no reason. It was simply a process of investigation and questioning, and kind of coming to the decision that anything I believed should be reasonably justified. I should have a good reason for believing anything that I believe. So yeah, there was no, and besides that, after the fact, it would be absurd to be angry at something that you don't think exists.
Well, and that's part of the problem. I actually was going to save this particular section for later in the discussion, but since you brought it up, I'm going to go ahead and hit this. Again. That's okay. We had someone come on to one of the atheist blogs and post why he didn't come on and ask, why did you guys become atheists, or why would you become atheists? He came onto the blog and he proceeded to tell us all why we were atheists. And his explanation was that he says there are two people that reject the Bible and God. There are those who feel so guilty they have done something horribly wrong that they feel they would never be forgiven for it. Then there are those who like the lifestyle or sin so much that they don't want to give it up for God or anyone. Well, the problem with this explanation for, while I don't know whether or not that would make someone reject God, the problem with the explanation is that it doesn't really address why someone would become an atheist. A person who feels guilty and doesn't think God would forgive them definitely believes in God. And a person who likes sin and decides that they don't feel like giving that up for God also believes in God. So neither of these explanations for why a person would be an atheist actually addresses atheism. In
a way, though, they do. Because from Dan's perspective, and the Christians who agree with Dan, as perhaps I might have, I don't know that I really considered that much about what an atheist was or why when I was a believer. But for them, that is their definition of atheist. Because there's this idea that everybody believes in God and atheists are just simply actively rejecting them. Oh, we really down deep believe, because it's such a visceral kind of experience for them that down at their core they just know that God exists, and therefore everybody else must just know it. So all of us atheists must deep down just know that God exists, and we're denying it. That's the way that they, a lot of them really look at it.
Right, but that's where I said, that's what I mean when I say that's where a disconnect happens. Yeah. And then one website that summarized it, I thought, really well, was someone had posted, "Over the years, I have come to know and know of many ex-Christians, most of whom were well-churched, their numbers including former ministers, apologists, missionaries, theologians, etc. Why should such people leave Christianity? These people are the best versed in Christianity, and yet they leave despite so much personal and professional investment in their religion, enjoyment of their time as believing Christians, and social pressures to stay. How can this happen if the evidence for Christianity is so good? If supernatural Christianity is true, why shouldn't they have known better? But what if the history and philosophical and moral implications of the various branches of Christianity are very different from that which is traditionally taught? The painful fact for many Christians is that through research and thinking, this is the conclusion to which they often come. Why else should all these people leave, contrary to their worldview, culture, professions, and heavy investment in Christianity? Why would God go to the trouble of incarnation and crucifixion only to allow genuine seekers to find Christianity untenable or give spurious experiences and incorrect interpretation to those who spend so many years trying to be Christians? And that's the point. This isn't a matter of, I don't know of anyone who's left Christianity to become an atheist, that would say, oh yeah, just one day I decided I just didn't believe this. I have yet to meet that person. But I've met many ex-Christian atheists, and they all explain the same story. And that's kind of what I brought here today. I wanted to...
There may be some who would say something similar in that in a simple sense, they're summarizing that at some point it just no longer made sense to believe.
Correct.
What I definitely say, I've never met or heard of an atheist who said, I used to believe in God, but I really decided that I wanted to live a sinful life, so now I deny him.
Right.
That's patently absurd.
Right. And so what you have is and I don't mean to say that not that there are no Christians who understand that some people don't believe what they believe. Right. There certainly are. But there are many Christians, especially the ones who are extremely confrontational or argumentative, who will confront an atheist and say, no, you don't know why you are an atheist, but I'm telling you it's because you just want to be evil, and you really know there's a God. And coming from being someone who used to believe in God, I can promise you I don't believe in God anymore. I don't believe that a God exists. It's not that I have a problem with God. Even when I left the church and rejected the church teachings prior to, and it was many years before I finally gave up belief in God. So even though I disagreed with my church and I left my church, I still went on to say, you know what God wants me to do is important. And if it's not, if this church is not correct, if Christianity is not correct, I still know that there's a God, and that I just need to figure out what it is that God wants for me. I didn't just give up belief because I gave up belief in these people.
Right.
I still believed that there was a God, and that I needed to find out what God wanted and what God was about, and what did I believe about God. And it was that search that several years down the road led to finally saying, you know what, my definition for God really encompasses many things that are not supernatural, and I'm using God as a metaphor. And that's when I realized that my definition of God did not include an actual external existing entity.
Yeah, it's that way for a lot. And, I think it's because that for a believer who thinks they have the one true belief, Christianity is the true religion. Jesus is the true Son of the one and only God. That when they find out somebody has studied and found Christianity unbelievable, unsupportable, and rejected Christianity, that is then the moment they become an atheist. That's not necessarily the case. That's just the moment when they've rejected Christianity. There are a number of other religions that I looked into and considered. There's philosophical positions about the possibility of the existence of a God. And any group of beliefs like that have to be considered. And so rejecting Christianity was step one, and then step two was, well, let's see if there's any truth to any of this, and let's begin investigating. And as you go through this process and find continually every religion is lacking any good reason to believe, and when you toss religion aside completely and just look at the philosophical cases and just try to say, is there any good reason to suppose that any sort of divine, transcendent, supernatural, governing intelligence exists? The resounding answer is no. And there could be, as you mentioned, years between A and B, and in my cases it was probably more a matter of a couple months between A and B, or maybe as much as a year. But yeah, it's not, rejecting Christianity doesn't make you an atheist, and if you don't believe that, then just go ask a Muslim. And when the guy wrote me this morning to ask what was it that made me angry at God, I felt like replying very glibly, but I didn't. Okay, what was it that made you angry with Santa Claus? Why did,
Yeah.
What did Santa do to you that pissed you off to the point where you no longer believed in him? Because clearly that's the only reason anybody, this guy brings you presents once a year. Yeah. Why would anybody reject this loving gift of, an iPod Nano or something?
And if you don't believe, you don't get gifts.
Yeah, you get lumps of coal. I don't know. I didn't become angry with Santa or Bigfoot or aliens or anything.
Right. No, and that's, like I say, there's disconnects. Another disconnect that happens, and I'm only bringing this up because I've got here lists of things that I found online that are people talking about why they became atheists and why they left Christianity. And then I have another batch of paperwork here that's people talking about why they believe, why I believe in God, why I think other people should believe in God, my reasons for belief. And I wanted to sort of show that there's a big difference between why someone becomes an atheist versus why someone becomes a Christian. And some of the people that, when I was finding belief hits, one of the problems I was running into was that I was finding people that perhaps were raised as Christians, and what I wanted were people that converted to Christianity, because that's what I'm looking at on the other side. I'm not looking at all atheists, because not all atheists used to be Christians. But I'm looking at why someone deconverts and becomes an atheist versus why someone would convert from atheism and become a Christian. And part of the issue has to do with information. And what I found consistently, and what we're going to talk about, is believers are consistently driven by emotional reasons. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm just saying that's what appears to be the drive. And the same with atheism. There appears to be a drive toward logic and reason for determining what they believe is true. In other words, an atheist might feel something is true, but if evidence doesn't support that, like I'm not going to say that there aren't unreasonable atheists, but the skeptical atheist, just like you would have the very believing Christian, the skeptical atheist would say it is less important what I feel than what I can actually substantiate. Whereas the believing Christian would say, you know what, even faced with something that seems to conflict, when I see reality seeming to conflict with what I believe, what really matters is that I just believe. And it's just two different views. It's the same information, it's just two different views of that information that I think causes the problem. And part of the problem that we run into also is the assumption, based on the idea that Matt was talking about, that if I believe in God so much, how could somebody not? And many Christians who come forward to offer apologetics, that's a huge thing with them, is you must feel this because I feel this. But with the atheist, feelings don't count for a lot. You can have those feelings and you can regard them, but they're not your basis for decision making in general. With what I will call the skeptical atheist, with not, like I say, not. And I'm also finding that people who considered themselves to be atheists that converted to Christianity overwhelmingly appear to be people who actually didn't put a lot of thought into God and didn't put a lot of thought into religion prior to converting to Christianity. These are people, and we'll look at their testimonies, and I did not make any effort to cull anything out. In fact, my search online was to try to find a hardcore skeptic who said, you know what, I became a Christian. And I'm not going to say I didn't find that person, because I did find a few that were noted, that were noted skeptics who said, you know what, I believe now. Well,
he claims to be a skeptic, but everything about the man says he's not a skeptic and never was.
Okay, I mean, but there are. I'm not going to say that there's no skeptic that ever converted and said, "I'm going to go with my feelings from this day forward."
You've got Antony Flew, for example, who was a famous atheist, skeptic, rationalist, who, I don't know, he's like 90 or something like that, and then comes out and states that he. Intelligent design arguments have convinced him, and now he's a deist. He's not a Christian or anything else.
When I
and then there were further discussions over the course of a couple of years where we find out that, you know what, he now admits that he was misled by the scientists who presented the intelligent design information, and now I don't know that anybody's sure what his beliefs are. But.
Well, but the point is, when you have very invested Christians deconverting to atheism, there doesn't seem to be very invested atheists, who I'm going to call skeptics, who deconvert and become Christians. Those conversions are few and far between, whereas there's a huge number of people who used to be Christians who are now atheists. And they're very easy to find because they're very willing to share information. Just to kind of go through, hit on one or two atheist testimonials, I wanted to start with one that I've been promising to talk about for a while, and finally I'm going to get around to it. And I wanted to use this one first because this was actually sent to me in a personal correspondence, and I did ask permission to use this, and the person said it was okay to use. I'm going to refer to this person as Stephen only. We're not going to use the last names. But Stephen is in a discussion with someone via the internet, but it's someone he knows personally, who wants to save his soul, found out he's an atheist, wants to save his soul. And Stephen, in his correspondence to me, has just sort of been saying, you know, this is what the idea I'm trying to express, and what do you think? Like, just kind of, can you look over my letter and see if you think it's clear? And when he wrote to me, there were some issues that this person that he's been writing to has been asking him about evolution. And I keep explaining, and Stephen's fully aware of this, evolution and atheism are separate issues.
Yeah.
A person does not have to believe evolution in order to be an atheist, and a person does not have to be an atheist in order to believe evolution. They are not dependent on one another. However, that's another assumption that a lot of Christian apologists make, which is that somehow if you, and this is the same one that I talked about earlier, Dan, he made the assumption, he told me that, you know, I believe in evolution, I believe in the Big Bang. I had never discussed that with him.
Yeah.
He had no idea what my stance was on either of those issues. I had not told him. He assumed that because I'm an atheist, I must believe evolution and I must believe the Big Bang Theory.
Which, in fairness, it's common.
Right.
For reasons of rational thought and accepting science as an explanation.
It's accepted for the same reasons that one evaluates anything and says, you know, I find this to be a reasonable assumption. And that's where my stance is. You know, and I told him that. I said, I don't walk around saying, you know, he was basically saying that I say Big Bang is true. And I said, no, I say it's a reasonable assumption. And that with more information, one day they may adjust this theory. I don't know. But it's not, it doesn't matter to me because it doesn't affect my atheism.
Yeah. If I found out tomorrow that the current model is completely wrong, my position on whether or not a God exists doesn't change.
Correct.
In order for me to change from disbelieving the proposition that a God exists to believing it and accepting it, you've actually got to present evidence to support that hypothesis.
Right.
Discrediting one hypothesis that might be in opposition to yours does nothing to prove yours.
But the idea that that atheists present like a disingenuous view of how they really feel about God is part of the reason that I wanted to share part of a personal correspondence, because this is someone writing to someone else kind of privately And when you express your views to your friends and you say, look, this is how I'm looking at this and this is my concern, you tend to be more honest. Most people will tend to be more honest and more upfront and more open than they will be when they might be posting publicly, and you might be a little bit more reserved about how much information you want to share or how much you want to talk about. But what he says is, and this is in regard to his correspondence with the other person, I don't want to give him the impression that my acceptance of evolution automatically made me an atheist. Rather, my acceptance of evolution made me realize how badly Christian apologists had lied to me about origins. I became disillusioned by this, which prompted me to ask more questions and seek answers more aggressively, and that was what led to my atheism. But that's too indirect and too easily confused. For now, I want to emphasize the message that origins debates are irrelevant with respect to whether or not God exists. Given how quick he was to jump on, oh, you must hate God so much, I don't want to give him an opportunity to axiomatically equate evolution with atheism and thereby rationalize dismissing both without further investigation. And to me, that's very clear, that you have this atheist saying, I don't want this person, this Christian that I'm talking to confuse the idea that evolution is why I'm an atheist, because it's really not. It's two separate, unrelated issues to me. And this is something that he says in honesty, in private, to another person. And yet still, there's a Christian apologist view that, evolution and atheism, that evolution drives people to atheism, and it really, I'm not going to say that it couldn't be a key factor in someone accepting atheism, but it certainly isn't necessary to become an atheist if you accept evolution. There's many Christians that accept it and still believe in God. I mean, it's...
On a side note, though, as far as I'm aware, all of the hosts and co-hosts involved in the show do accept evolution. We get a lot of calls from people because the topic comes up. It's because Christianity actually is proposing an explanation of origins and proposing an explanation for life and the universe and everything. So, because of that, as soon as you deny a particular religion, you're left with this gap that you need to fill, or perhaps you might have already filled it with other scientific explanations. So evolution does come up. My atheism, nobody's atheism that I'm aware of, is contingent upon evolution being true. But because it comes up a lot, and we try and avoid having detailed discussions about it, because we're not biologists, we're not experts in evolution. I would hate to give out misinformation that falsely propped up somebody's position on something. But I talked to Russell, and I think in one of the upcoming shows we're actually going to be digging a little deeper into evolution, because there's been new evidence and new discoveries over the past few years that finally pinpoint problems with intelligent design theory, which is what they're trying to pump into the classrooms. But we'll save that.
Okay. Maybe I should just hit on, I'll just hit on a couple more that I found online. This is people that posted publicly about what made them, this is actually from someone who still believes in God. So this was a person who claims that they're still believing in God. But what they posted was at Talk Origins, and they said, to my eternal dismay, I was consumed by the creationist claims of contradictory evidence, meaning contradictory evidence causing a problem for evolution.
Right.
Their site was well formatted, and by this he means the apologist site, was well formatted and easily navigated. It provided quotes and references and seemed, and he puts that in all caps, that it seemed legitimately concerned with exposing errors in evolutionary theory. Through two scientists, which I engaged in friendly debate, I received information that made me search for additional information. I wound up here. I believe in God. However, after reviewing specific details left out by the creationist website, I have come to the sincere conclusion that they are deceptive and purposely crafty. I am a novice at science, no experimentation, just lots of reading. If I can locate information that shows their accusations to be unfounded, I am sure that these people can and should do the same, meaning the people that posted the creationist website. They use their PhDs to induce your confidence in their research and observations, accuse evolutionists of bending evidence to fit their theory, and leave out information that is pertinent. So this is kind of what Stephen explained, that I was, I believed in God, and, when I when I came across information on evolution that I found myself, I began to realize that I was not getting the full story here. And the problem is that when you're trusting information that's provided to you by other Christian apologists, and then you find out that what they're telling you is not full disclosure, you have to ask yourself why. You know, why is it that someone would purposely misrepresent the other side? Why is it that someone would purposely withhold key information and just give part of the information and claim that it's incorrect without actually giving the entire context for that information? Most people tend to research even more after coming to this realization to say, you kind of say, what else are they lying to me about?
Yeah.
And it becomes just an avalanche of, oh my goodness, they're lying about all sorts of things. And you can't believe some of the things you've been told, or I can believe, and I know this is the same experience many people have had, the amount of misinformation that I was provided as a Christian by famous apologists. And I'm going to name Josh McDowell as number one. I called him the other day on the blog, I think, King of the Half-Truth.
Yeah.
I mean, he gives the information that supports
I don't think he's quite king. Lee Strobel is king.
Okay.
Because Lee Strobel pretends to be a skeptic, then goes around interviewing people who agree with him and asks them easy questions. He's basically just a shill for the intelligent design community. You know, you're talking about the creationists who are and the intelligent design folks, whoever, they're essentially propping up people's beliefs on bad information. They're providing, you know, a false foundation for beliefs. It reminds me of, you know, in the Sermon on the Mount, where you don't build your house on the sand at the end.
Well, and I want to talk too, though. There was one specific believer who posted why he believes in God. And I did have a little bit of a commentary on that one, so I'm hoping I can locate
my concern with it is this, is that why is it necessary and why is it so common for these people, like you've got this guy who ran off to get a PhD in geology who is a young earth creationist, and now he's going to work for Liberty University and the Discovery Institute and everything else. Why is it why is it necessary or seem necessary for these people to put together all these half-truths and lies and misinformation in order to prop up people's belief? Isn't there real good evidence to prop up people's belief? Does it just not exist? Is that why you're out there lying and making stuff up? Because there's no good information?
Here's what I found. This is what I found, and this is, I think, very telling. Like Josh McDowell, the section that I studied, or this version of his information that I studied, was called Evidences for Your Faith. And if you think about it, the idea that you believe something already and then you're going out to try to find evidence to support why you believe it should tell you something.
Yeah.
If you don't know why you believe it and you have to go and get somebody to provide information to tell you why you already believe a thing, then this really isn't the evidence that supports your faith, because you already had the faith before you came across this evidence. So the faith is not based on this, and that's the disingenuous nature of the hardcore Christian apologist, is that they'll come forward and say, these are the reasons I believe, and they list these apologetics that are fairly flawed. And when push comes to shove, the real thing is that they believed it already, and then they went and got the apologist arguments memorized. Your reason for your faith is not the apologetic argument. I'm not going to say that there's not anyone who ever was presented by an apologist argument that was converted by that. What I'm saying is that most Christians that I know who use apologist arguments as saying this is the reason I believe, it's really not. They believed it before they found the arguments. They usually went to get the arguments after they got into a discussion with a skeptic and then decided I better find something to help me support an argument for what I believe. And then they go and they find these apologetics, and then they come back and they say this is my response. Well, then they usually get shredded based on the fact that the apologetics are only half-truths and they don't have the full story. And then when the skeptic comes back and says, yes, but you've left out A, B, C, and D, and you actually have just sort of shoved this point aside, which is extremely relevant because it impacts what you're claiming, that's when you see a lot of defensiveness and anger that comes out. And again, I'm not talking about all Christians. This is a specific
or all of anybody.
Right. This is a specific type of Christian, I think, and that's why I keep trying to say the apologist, because that's mainly who it is. This is just an example of what I'm describing. there's a website, and this person actually posted their name, Lambert Dolphin, and posted quite a bit of information about what they believed and why. And he says in his own testimonial, and this is a believer who also claimed to be an ex-skeptic, he says, "But by the age of 30, I had reached existential despair. Life is meaningless. There is no purpose for man's existence. Suicide seemed a good way out, except that I was a coward. And what if there were a hell, and I got out, and I got out there and couldn't come back? Besides, my grandmother back in Idaho had been praying for me since the day I was born." This is hardly skeptical thinking. I just want to say that any skeptic would say, "I'm sorry, Lambert, but you're not a skeptic if any of this is true. Then you are not what is considered a skeptic, because you're going on feelings of despair, feelings of meaninglessness, you're lacking purpose, you're thinking of suicide, and this is what's driving you. It's feelings, again, driving you. And your grandmother's been praying, and to a skeptic, all of this is irrelevant. This would say, how does this impact the reality of what you believe? This is simply how you feel. And it's fine that you have these feelings, and your feelings are valid feelings, but they certainly don't prove anything in reality. He also says, "My first prayer went something like this: Okay, God, if you are there, I think I may need to be forgiven, and you can have the rest of my life. Please help me." A skeptic wouldn't generally pray to God. There wouldn't be this assumption that there is a God. They would need some evidence in order to believe that there was a God before they would hit their knees and pray to a God. And then he says, "I waited no more than a millisecond until I felt flooded and overwhelmed with love." Again, you get this emphasis on feeling. God's love. There in that office and now in my heart was the same Jesus I had read about in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So this person's belief, and like I said, I'm not going to condemn belief on emotion, but his belief on emotion is clear. I mean, he's believing because he feels this is true. He's having feelings that are driving his belief. The problem is that on his homepage, he states, "Lambert became a Christian in 1962 after a long search through the religions and philosophies of the world." Well, that's not what he described. He described that he became a Christian because of feelings that drove him to that, feelings of despair, feelings of meaninglessness, not knowing where to go. He was not happy in his life, and he turned to Christianity to find that love that was lacking. And then when he felt that love, he called it Jesus, and he accepted it, and now he believes. That is not the result of a search through religion and philosophy. That's the result of responding to emotion.
Yep. Let's go ahead and start taking some calls. The phone lines are full right now. We'll get the number back up for you as soon as we start clearing some of these out. Thanks again for everybody who's watching. As a reminder, we're on every Sunday from 4:30 to 6 o'clock on cable channel 10, and after the program we'll be going to Threadgills. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to join us down there. The show's over at 6 o'clock, and we'll be down at 6:30. So we've got, is it Kevin?
Yes.
Hey, how you doing?
Well, good afternoon. I'm sorry. I just want to say, first of all, that I've watched the show a couple of times, and I've never saw a show that made me feel disgusted about talking. You guys are very intelligent, and I appreciate that. The thing that I really wanted to talk about the most is I've already given up the belief in religion or Christianity, because I've never believed in a devil or something that was just as powerful as, what people say God is. I don't profess to know, or I've given it up totally, I think. But what I wanted to really speak on was that, to me, if anything, I don't really like the labels Christianity, spirituality, or even atheism. The labels don't do well for me. I don't like being put in that label. But anyway, what I really wanted to say is I think that, if anything, atheism, by definition, is probably more natural than Christianity, because you're introduced to Christianity, but you're born naturally atheist.
Right. Yeah. It would
be. You don't really believe in anything at that point.
Yeah. For propositions like that, the default position is atheism. I mean, it's a lack of belief in something. There's no justification to believe. Belief is reserved until there's a justification for belief, and that's the way it is for nearly everything.
Right. But what I really wanted to do was find out, will you guys talk on, like, I'm a married man, and my wife is definitely a Christian. I don't knock her beliefs. I don't buy into them.
Right.
But how do you coexist with someone that's really, like,
Yeah, I can.
I don't even mind. I'm sorry for cutting you off, but I don't even really mind, you know, being in an environment where Christians are, or going to a Christian church. I mean, I've studied a lot of Christianity, and you know, it's like, you know, the beliefs are. I mean, think about it. Christianity was started after Jesus Christ supposedly died. So, I mean, what kind of stock can you really hold in that?
Right, Jesus was a Jew.
Exactly. It doesn't even really make sense. Yeah. But I don't knock people's beliefs or what they like. That's atheism. Fine. I never knocked it. I didn't even know about atheism until I moved here to Austin. I've never seen a show like this, so I watch it every chance I get, so I can understand your stand a little bit more. But I think I'm probably a natural atheist, because if you can't really prove it to me, then how can you say that it's real? I mean, think about it. How can you really say that it's real? Yeah. Even if you want to believe in something, you still can't. I mean, people used to believe that the earth was flat.
You were asking, though, about how do you coexist with a believer. I guess it sort of depends on your relationship with your wife and whether or not. 'Cause I'm married, and my husband is not an atheist. And it just depends on whether or not you can talk about it, and if you want to talk about it, or if you can't talk about it, or if you don't want to talk about it. I mean, there's a lot of dynamics involved in relationships, and it sometimes is just best to not talk about something if it's a big problem.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's where I'm at right now. Okay. But I just really want to say thank you for and I don't necessarily feel like I have to fight against people that believe in something. I can prove to you that what you believe in is not real, but I don't want to fight. You know.
Right.
You know.
Are you? Just out of curiosity, is your wife inclined to discuss this with you?
Not when I can prove that she's, you know, believing in a bunch of.
I guess what I'm asking is, does either one of you seem to initiate conversations about belief or non-belief? Or do you feel? I mean,
no, we don't really talk about it, I guess.
Okay, so she doesn't really come. She's not trying to convert you or something.
No, I mean, I can go to a Christian church. I don't have to buy. I basically, to me, it's more like a social gathering.
Sure, I understand.
More so than anything else, and I can go and do that. I mean, because I know in my heart that, you know, I can't. I'm gonna be honest with you. I can't prove that a God exists or doesn't exist. I know I'm here.
Right.
You know? And I know that you know, when I leave, I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
So why believe in something that you don't even really know that much about? That's the first thing.
I agree.
I mean, it's just so. But I don't knock people. I mean, I've studied a lot of different religions.
Right.
Yeah, one of the big things I end up trying to do most often is that I try to make sure that when we're talking about something, we're talking about issues and not people, so that while I might say a particular idea is stupid or unjustified or without any basis, I wouldn't say it as that the person is stupid, because I'd basically be insulting myself, because from the age of 5 until, you know, around 32, 33 or so, I was an atheist. I was a Christian. You know, I got saved at the age of 5 and rededicated my life in my teen years and believed this stuff, you know, wholeheartedly. I wasn't perfect. I was a normal person who did things like anybody else. But there's no point in attacking the people. But also, you know, you say you can go into churches. I've gone into churches. I don't mind going for, you know, I went for a funeral for a friend of mine. Her son had passed away. I went for that. I don't mind participating in some things like that. But I also think that, and you mentioned not wanting to fight. I'm not necessarily looking for a fight, but I do think that the issues are important enough that we need to discuss them, specifically because people are taking their private personal beliefs and pushing them out onto the public. Right. And the example that I brought up earlier, where just this senator or this representative, simply by stating in a poll completely unrelated to his job that he was a non-theist, has caused an outrage amongst this one Christian group who now want Congress to take time out of the rare occasions when they do business and stand there and give their personal testimonies. That's outrageous. Never mind that it's it's a violation of our Constitution, where there shouldn't be religious tests for office, and the First Amendment and all these other issues. It's just unnecessary. It's wasteful, and that's a huge problem with religion. People waste money. You get your 10% tithing, and you're building these huge churches. And I'm sure, you know, we all know that churches and religious organizations do good in the world. They do help out. They do run charities and help people. But there's a huge amount of money that's wasted.
Right. What I like is I like the fact that you guys stay intelligent. You don't have to, get ignorant. I mean, when you look at some religious shows, I mean, they basically want to chastise people just because they don't think that the same way that they do, and I think that's wrong.
And that's what we're addressing here today, is just the idea of the Christian, and I don't mean, like I say, I keep qualifying this, I don't mean all Christians, I mean these hardcore right-wing apologists that come out and say, you're an atheist because you love sin, and you just want to do evil and you hate God. And that's not why I'm an atheist. So I feel compelled to say, you're incorrect, that's not why I'm an atheist.
Well, like I said earlier, I think it's more natural.
Right,
I think it's more natural than religion. Definitely. And I don't know if I'm necessarily, I don't like the labels.
That's
don't label me as a Christian, don't label me as a black or white.
I'll just label you as a friend of the show.
Right, and
I will definitely.
See, I need to get around you guys more so that I can really,
We have a perfect opportunity for you with our number of events and dinner after the show. I mentioned before we'll be going to Threadgill's. You're more than welcome to come down and join us, and you're also welcome to come to our other events as well.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for calling, Kevin. Appreciate the call.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You mentioned how basically you were talking about hardcore fundamentalists that you were talking about those things. There was an interesting article that Sam Harris wrote, and I love reading his stuff.
Yeah, me too.
He talked about the spheres of belief, how at the very core you have extremists like Islamic extremists or dominionist Christians, and then out from there you've got fundamentalists and then moderates and then liberals and everything else. And the thing that he made about this point wasn't so much that there are the spheres, but the people on the outside ring, the liberal ring, are protecting the inner rings from criticism, which are protecting that ring from criticism as well.
Right.
They're all kind of feeding from the same pool, so and encouraging each other that way. But we got, is it Ed?
Yeah.
Hey Ed, how you doing?
Pretty good. Hey Matt, one of your favorites was on TV just today.
I heard.
Kurt Cameron.
Yeah.
I think is his name. He's one of those guys that says, I was an atheist and now I'm a Christian, blah, blah, blah. Then he goes on later on to say, I hated God, and it's like, well, if you were an atheist, how did you hate God?
Right.
I heard Ray Comfort explain people have sometimes an aha moment or an epiphany where they have a world-changing realization. I heard Ray Comfort mention once that Kirk Cameron's epiphany, I kid you not, was, what if I'm wrong? He was an atheist, and he said, what if I'm wrong? And now he's a Christian. Holy cow.
Yeah.
What if you're right? Why didn't you ask the other question?
Right. I just thought that was kind of interesting that...
why doesn't he ask that question now? What if he's wrong about Christianity, and really it's Muslims who got it right, or Jews who got it right, or Buddhists who got it right? I mean, it's absurd. It's the lamest Pascal's wager I've ever heard.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, no skeptic would ever be swayed by Pascal's wager.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was on some television program?
I'm sorry?
He was on some television program? Somebody mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, he was on some, I can't remember what it was. It was some real stupid thing, but it said underneath, like he was an actor and he was in the Left Behind series or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I thought of you whenever I saw him because I know that you've mentioned it before. He's such a freakoid.
Yeah.
But, anyway, I had to turn it off after a few seconds. I couldn't take his...
See, that's the difference, is that I'd like to turn it off, but as soon as I see him or Ray Comfort talking, I just want to sit there and take notes so that I can rip them to shreds later on. Because as much as I hate to admit it, these guys' arguments, as weak as they are, they get out there. They spread. Yeah. This person that Tracie was talking about earlier, Dan, who's posted on the Atheist Experience blog, is parroting almost word for word a lot of the Way of the Master series arguments.
Oh yeah.
And these things have really simple answers. I mean, it's not like they're looking, for the math behind the Big Bang or a unified moral theory, as a direct result from is to ought in philosophical thinking. These are simple things like the banana is the atheist's nightmare because it's custom fitted to your hand and it's got a protective wrapper and fits in your mouth. That's absurd. I can't hardly take it.
Right.
It's all totally stupid. Anyway,
thanks a lot for calling, Ed. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Yeah, it's those. Kirk Cameron on TV, you know. I guess I hate to be mean and say that he found a way back on TV after his TV show failed, but that kind of seems to be part of what happened. But
yeah,
we got, is it Juliet?
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Hello. I was just flipping through the channels and I was looking at your show, and you were saying that you were a Christian for years, many years, and I wanted to know what made you change, or what made you question God. What makes you question the Bible?
Yay. Thanks for being on topic. Go ahead. You
totally on
did
topic.
The same thing.
Yeah, that's actually what we're talking about today, is what causes a person to deconvert from Christianity to atheism. And what we're hitting on is most believers will lean toward emotional response and say, I believe because I feel that it's correct. I feel that there is a God.
But then again, it's like, but then you're saying, you know, most people will lean on feelings, but the word is really the beginning. If you think about it, there's so many religions out there, and they all depend on one thing, which is the Bible, right?
No.
I can understand, the differences between people's religions, and that...
I put you on hold. I didn't hang up. There's a problem with the mics where you can't always hear us when we're talking. When you say there's all these religions out there and they all depend on the Bible, you are factually in error. Right. There's only a handful that depend on the Bible. There's thousands of different Christian denominations, but you've ignored any religion that depends on the Quran or the Bhagavad Gita or any
right? Yeah,
stuff.
the Vedas, Upanishads.
Yeah, I said it wrong.
Yeah, that's fine. Bhagavad Gita. That's
anyways, there's always literature to something. So how can you say that everybody depends on their feelings? You know, if you read in the Bible, basically. The Bible is a way of life. Let me
ask you one quick question. Yeah. What makes you think that the Bible might remotely be true? What evidence do you have
What evidence do you have that it's not true?
But the point is, you're going on, you believe it. You feel that it's true. When you read it, you feel that it's true. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with your feelings. That's how you feel, and that's your legitimate feeling. I'm simply saying that most people, when they believe in things to do with religion, are believing based on their feelings.
Where are you getting the facts from, the information?
Well, actually, that's what I've got here today. I pulled up a bunch of believer testimony
from the website, from an internet website, or
just different people saying why they believe.
We're not talking about raw statistical numbers or facts.
The
question is there any good reason to think that the Bible is an authority, that it's a word of God, that's a message for your life? Is there any good reason?
But why wouldn't it be? How could you question that if you're saying, well, there's only a handful of religions that use the Bible, and then there's other religions that use different other, like the Quran or whatever. It's like, if you're saying, well, how do you believe in the Bible? How can you read in the Bible and think that that's real? Well, then why aren't you questioning everybody else?
We are.
We do. They're also all wrong.
Yeah. I'm saying that religious belief is based on.
But how are they wrong if everybody has a different belief?
How are you saying that the others are wrong?
That's just like your opinion. That's like my opinion and your opinion.
Okay, so your belief is nothing more than just another opinion. It's largely irrelevant to anything else. It's like whether or not you like vanilla or chocolate ice cream.
Not to me, but I mean, to other people it might be.
What we're talking about here today, though, is the reasons people believe things, and I'm just simply saying that for.
So what's the reason why you don't believe in God?
Because there's no evidence. There's no evidence and no good reason to think that any of it's true.
But then again, you're saying that from 5 to 30 you believed in God. So what was the reason between those time periods that you believed in God and now you don't?
Because I was raised to believe, and I was ignorant, and I did not go out and investigate to find out whether or not any of this was likely to be true.
You didn't find that information or the statistical matter, or where you just woke up one day and was like, I don't believe in God, or what made you just...
No, that's not remotely it.
This is why we're having the show today.
I can't, obviously, I mean, you missed part of the show. There's something critical that you're missing, and that is that, I believed. And what I said was, the reason that I've changed my beliefs is because I went out to find out whether or not my beliefs were likely to be true, whether there was a good reason to believe that it was true. Don't you care?
Was the good reason?
Hang on, would you wait just a second? Do you care whether or not what you believe is true?
Well, in the Bible, because I'm a Christian, so
I don't care about the Bible.
There's not no...
I don't care about the Bible. I asked a question. Do you care whether or not what you believe is true? That's important.
I lean on faith. So I don't.
So you don't care.
There's no real information. Just
so
like that's just like me saying, well, I was born one day, and because I don't know where I came from, you know.
So you don't care whether or not your beliefs are true.
Human existence. I mean, what?
So what you're saying is that you do not care whether or not your beliefs are true.
But also, I want to add that you just said that you believe on faith and that you have no real information. And when I say that's why you believe, you seem to get offended by it. But yet when you say it, it's exactly what I just said.
Because we're having a conversation, but what I'm saying is I lean on faith because I don't know what's going to happen next. So it's not, I don't wake up in the morning, I don't depend on myself. But that's the reason why I believe in God. I believe that God will help me throughout the day.
So you believe because it feels good.
And I lean on that.
Yeah.
Because I lean on trust, I lean on faith, I lean on that.
It's comforting to you.
You feel because it feels good. It's comforting, right?
I do it because that's what's real.
No. That's not what you've said, and that's critical.
You said there's no real information.
Everything you've said is that there's no information, that there's no... Now you're saying that you're doing it because it's real. Now, I asked you earlier whether or not you cared what you believe is true, and you ducked that answer.
Yes, of course. No, I said I cared, but I said you probably wouldn't care because that's my opinion. That's what I said. No. Everybody has their own opinions, and that's the whole reason why you're an atheist and I'm a Christian.
Okay,
everybody has their own opinion, their own beliefs.
If it's something you can easily discard as a matter of just opinion, then we might as well be talking about whether we like chocolate or vanilla.
But wait a second. Whether or not something exists is not an opinion. If I say that a chair exists...
Well, that's basically how it is for you because you're just, you know...
No. It's not how it is for us.
Existence is a matter of reality. Fact. I mean, if something exists or it does not exist, that's not an opinion.
This pen is either here or it isn't.
Yeah.
God either exists or it doesn't.
Right.
Your beliefs are either true or they are not true.
Right. This is not a matter of opinion. You know, opinion would be whether or not the pen writes well, but the pen is here, and that is a fact. And even if I hold up nothing and say that a pen exists in my hand, that's also a statement of fact. It is a false statement of fact. But when you say something exists, you are claiming fact, not opinion.
Additionally, let's ignore all of that for a second and say that we were talking about matters that just boiled down to opinion. The morality of something like slavery, for example, that's just an opinion. It doesn't really matter, right? I mean, it should be okay for somebody to think that slavery is okay. But in reality, we realize that slavery is morally wrong and that it's worth taking the time and effort to point out to people why it's wrong. And it's worth taking the time and effort to say that, you know what, this isn't just a matter of opinion. It's about how we want to live and what is right in how we treat each other.
That's because slavery actually happened. That's because there were people that actually witnessed slavery with their own eyes. We can't witness what's in supernatural or what's in the natural.
Correct. Exactly. That's why we don't believe it. Because you can't observe it. There's nothing to observe.
You've completely transposed.
So you mean to tell me that you depend on yourself every day and you think when you die you're not going to go anywhere?
Correct.
That's correct.
Yes.
So where did you come from? Do you know?
My parents.
My parents, yeah.
And that's it. Where did your parents come from and their parents and their grandparents and their grandparents come from? You don't think that there's
if the answer
people came from people?
Well, they do come from people.
Are we evolved from monkeys? I mean, where do you think we came from?
I think that apes and humans have a common ancestor.
But regardless,
but it doesn't matter.
Regardless, the fact is,
it does matter.
No, it actually
you
it doesn't.
Come from somewhere. So you don't believe that you have a soul within?
No.
You don't believe in none of that?
No. But even if the answer to where did biology originate, like where did biological organisms originate, if the answer to that is I don't know, it still doesn't prove there's a God.
But nobody really knows, though. Then
why would you claim there's a God? Then why would
nobody really knows?
Then why would someone claim there's a God?
Grass came from dirt. But
you just admitted nobody really knows.
So if you don't know, if you don't know, then it seems silly to claim that there's a God that did it.
And it's absurd to believe something without evidence to support that belief.
Right.
And if you want to say that you believe based on faith, congratulations.
Then you just supported what I'm claiming.
Millions of other people who are willing to comfortably hold an irrational, contradictory belief in their head and deal with the rest of their life on reasonable terms.
But to say honestly, I don't know, and then say, I believe God did it, it's like you can't say that. If the truth is you don't know, then you should say, I don't know.
Well, the only thing the only thing I have to say is the Bible's been around for many, many years. There's been dinosaurs, there's been people, we've evolved, and throughout the years, people die off. You don't live forever, right?
Yeah.
But the Bible has lasted around for many, many years, and that's been proof because it's actually been handed down from people to people to people to people.
Correct.
So that is proof of what is real.
And what about all the other books that have lasted for a long time that have been handed down from people to people?
They're still in use today.
And what about other ideas that aren't, in book form that have been handed down from people to people to people? You're making absurd arguments. You're claiming that something is true. Something is true because it's comfortable, because a lot of people have believed it, because it's been around a long time. Congratulations, you just explained why people felt that the earth was flat.
But here's something that's interesting that you were asking what books, because I actually have something in today's notes about that. There's a pamphlet someone gave me to use on the show that's called The Christian, the Holy Scriptures. And in that little pamphlet, it has a quote that says, "There is nothing like Scripture. If you could lay your hand on any human writing of 3,000 years ago, what would you find? A curious relic of antiquity having no application whatsoever to us or to our time. A musty document, a piece of obsolete writing referring only to a state of society and to a condition of things long since passed away. The Bible, on the contrary, is the book for today." Well, here was my observation on that. "Slaves, obey your masters" has application for our time. This is from the book for today. Buddhist teachings start at about 2,700 years ago, and there are many modern and traditional Buddhists today. Buddhist philosophy is extremely relevant to any time period as it addresses discipline and emotional response. The Vedas date from about 1500 BC and predate any biblical writings. The Upanishads are dated at around 800 BC. Certainly, there are still many Hindus today. And I've read these books and found many of the teachings to be very philosophically relevant to modern life. Arjuna, there's one example I was going to give, but I'll say that for another time since I don't have a lot of time. The Old Testament, by comparison, dates back to only about 500 BC, and that's the oldest date supposed. So in no way is the Bible unique in its age or in its applicability to modern life. Misinformation disseminated by a Christian apologist is a common theme to Christian to atheist deconversion stories, and this is an example.
So where did you pull that off of the internet?
Well, that last paragraph was my thought. I got the first quote.
Because we're okay with thinking originally.
But I want to
let me answer that.
Getting all this information from though.
The first quote about the Bible being unique is from a pamphlet that a Christian puts out. What I say is that when you look up the information on the Hindu Vedas, the Hindu Upanishads, it way predates the Bible, and it's still in use today. And the same with Buddhist philosophy. And
so why don't you believe in that then?
Why should I? I don't believe in yours, and I don't believe in theirs for the same reasons. Why should I believe it?
Because
you have faith does not convince me that what you believe is true.
If you are going to go with your beliefs...
I'm just amazed by you guys. I mean, really, because, I don't know. I just believe that you're always going to need somebody. You always have to depend on somebody, whether it's a higher power or another.
I depend on all kinds of people.
Not what I'm saying is,
how do you wake up in the morning and not think that you just wake up and you think that you're depending on yourself every day?
How do you wake up in the morning and assume that everyone
I depend on God. I depend on God to give me
the thing is,
how completely and utterly depressingly sad that is, that you think that the only reason you can get through the day after waking up is that God is looking out for you. It's great to be able to take advantage of the knowledge that you're in control of your life, that you have friends and family around you that you care for, that you can also, that they care for you too. That when the going gets tough, you can depend on your close friends, you can depend on yourself, and do things with your hands instead of hitting your knees and hoping that God will miracle your ass out of whatever trouble you're in. I mean, people talk about, the guy before who was saying that he got so bogged down by existentialism that life became meaningless and pointless and suicide became an option. You know what? In the newspaper article from today, the title had something to do with preaching his own gospel of atheism. And somebody asked me if I objected to that because it said gospel of atheism. And I said, no, I absolutely don't. Of course I don't. Because gospel means good news. And quite frankly, I do think that atheism is good news. Every religion, every belief that includes an omniscient, transcendent being belittles everything about reality. Everything becomes trivial. This 80 to 100 years that you spend on the planet becomes meaningless in comparison to an eternity afterwards. Every beautiful flower becomes far less beautiful because of what could have been from an omnipotent creator that's going to do this. Every decision you make in your life, every action you take, every joyful feeling you have is trivialized by a notion that you are the puppet or the plaything or the loving or the beloved creation of some benign dictator who wants nothing more than for you to love him back and make sure you don't sleep with the wrong person. It boggles the mind for you to come on here. I mean, I realize you're sincere, but even when I was at my most devout belief, I didn't get up in the morning and say, well, the only reason I can get through today is because Jesus loves me. I had no doubt that Jesus loved me, but that's not what got me through the day. And to think that that's your reason. I mean, first you talk about faith, and then you admit that nobody has a reason, and then maybe you believe because it's comfortable, and blah blah blah, and maybe you do or don't care about whether or not your beliefs is true. You're asking Tracie where she got her information from, and oh, did you get it off the internet? Well, yeah, some of it probably came off the internet. The question isn't where did you get it, but how reliable is it? And the other question is not where did we get the information, but if you actually do care about whether or not your beliefs are true, why haven't you gone to get the information? And the answer is that you're perfectly comfortable getting up in the morning and thinking that you can only get through the day because of your belief in God. And if there's one thing that I'm trying to do, it's trying to show people that religious mentality, that faith-based life is harmful, really harmful. Lying to people and telling them that, well, grandma's gone to a better place and we'll meet her again someday, does nothing to help people cope with grief, which is something that is real that they experience. Telling them that God's watching out for them and just pray and everything will work out fine does nothing to helping them solve the problems in their life. It doesn't help them find new jobs. It doesn't help them find new loved ones and partners. It doesn't help them with anything. All it does is build up false hope, a big house of cards that the first wind is going to blow down. And I apologize for going off on a long rant. We let you talk, quite a bit over the course of the call, but it's really sincerely depressing to have somebody say, well, why do you to build up all these false cases and then sum it all up as I can only get through the day because I think God loves me. Other people love you. There are wonderful things to do in life, and those are the reasons to get through the day. Those are the reasons to look for tomorrow. I mean, if you really thought God loved you, the only concern you have is not how to get through this life. It's when is this life over so I can get on to the next one. And that's the harsh reality of it. That's the theology that your particular religion has built up, that this is all meaningless place to wipe our feet while we wait for God to come deliver us to some wonderful pleasure palace. It's absurd. I'm going to go ahead and let you go. You're free to call back. I'm going to move on to some other callers. I thank you for the call. Anybody who didn't get through today, as a reminder, if you don't get through, you can email tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to everybody involved with the show, myself, the co-hosts, everybody behind the scenes as well. And we read every email. We can't necessarily respond to all of them, but we've got 20 minutes left, or actually less, because our show's now been shortened by 90 seconds for ads. So I want to go ahead and get on to other callers. You're free to call back. I just wanted to free the line up.
Yeah, go ahead.
But we got Steve. How you doing?
Pretty good. I liked what that one caller said about being a natural atheist, and I wouldn't say I'm an atheist for emotional reasons, but I just wanted to say something along that lines of emotions, and the people who are atheists aren't robots. They're emotional people, and there are actually, I think, emotional benefits to, I guess, being comfortable with your outlook on things. And
yeah.
I think when I was raised, I was never really a Christian. I tried to be a Christian. I think in the end, that's what I'm saying now. Along the way, I professed belief and was trying very hard to believe. I think I was always skeptical and, was uncomfortable with my incomplete ability to actually believe with what I was expected to believe. And actually letting go and actually say I don't believe it was a huge relief. And in terms of emotions, I am much more comfortable in my skin with myself saying I do not believe that, because that is just what is true. I never could quite accept it. So that's my own personal side of it, is that I think another thing that happens is people want to know, where do you get the comforting things from religion about what's going to happen when you die or getting through hard times. And, those things happen to everybody. But in some ways it's comforting to know things like, the universe works the same way all the time. And, these kinds of storms are finite. Whether I make it through or not, the sun's going to come up eventually and the birds are going to chirp. Whether they care about me or not, I don't know. But, I can be comforted by that. I can actually, in the same way, I think people get comforting from other things. So I just wanted to say, I just don't want us to be portrayed as not needing emotional supports or not feeling, our life when we're experiencing it. But I know you guys aren't saying that, but people might jump to that conclusion, that we're actually just toughing it out and we don't, experience a lot of the emotions.
About cold logic and facts and all that stuff. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you go. I appreciate the call. It kind of, whoops, crap. Sorry. It reminded me of a discussion that came up this morning with regard to my parents, actually, because this person had written me to find out, based on something that was said in the article, why I felt compelled to convert my parents, and the answer is that I don't. I don't know where that came from. What I said was that I don't believe they're likely to change their minds on this. I don't feel compelled to try and change their minds. We don't discuss it. They're not comfortable with it, and I don't actively go out seeking fights, which is why this is a call-in show and not a call-out show. It'd be really kind of cool, I think, maybe, to get a list of preachers in the area and come in here and call them up and challenge them on their beliefs. But I don't do that. Instead, I'd rather talk to people who are actually interested in discussing the issues. But I do, I'm going to take another call here because if the question's correct, I think it's going to lead into what I was about to say anyway. So, Lance, you had a question?
Yeah, I watch the show from time to time. Seem like smart folks, I feel embarrassed. A lot of people that call and disagree, but you seem like a nice guy, and I was curious if we weren't just a little upset a while ago. Did you really mean what you had said about people with faith kind of thinking of the world as a place to wipe their feet until it's time to go to heaven?
You broke up there. You asked me if I really meant something. I can guarantee you that if I said it, I really meant it. But what
you seem like you might be saying it out of frustration and like a little angry. But I mean, religious people thinking of the world as just a place to wipe their feet until it's time to go to heaven. I mean, that's a little. That's a little exaggerated. I mean, you don't really believe that.
Yes, I really do believe that. It's accurate because it's one example of how I think this religious, faith-based mentality causes problems. And the other example, which kind of ties into what I was saying a minute ago, is my parents are deeply religious people, and I was raised that way. Now that they've found out that I'm an atheist, that caused them some grief, some emotional pain that was real. And the only reason they experienced that is because of this faith-based belief that they have, this system which is divisive, which creates an us and them mentality. Their belief is so strong that they're convinced that their son is now going to spend eternity forever in hell. And that causes them grief. And my thing is that that's a prime example of how religion is causing a problem in their life. The simple fact that I don't happen to agree with them, and the fact that they have polluted their mind and accepted an immoral dogma which states that simply not believing in something is a justification to torture somebody forever in hell, those two things together have now caused them grief and pain that I'd rather they not experience, but I can't do anything about it.
I just wanted to add, the apologist we were talking about who's posting at the blog, one of the quotes that Stephen responded to was, that this apologist offered was, "I hate this life."
Yeah, it's in the Bible.
I hate this life. And the idea that you're all worldly, you care about the world, and you shouldn't care about the world, you shouldn't be part of the world, you shouldn't be, this is what we're hearing from Christians. So I don't think that this is something, I do agree that Matt's summary may sound harsh, but it's extrapolated reasonably from what the book teaches and what the people interpret it as. When you sort of lead down that path, that's actually logically where it goes, that this world matters not, and that it's wrong to even consider yourself a part of it.
I mean, if you accept the Bible, you've got right there in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus is giving the Sermon on the Mount and says right in there that take no thought for today. Don't worry about what you're going to eat, what you're going to drink, where your clothes come from. God will provide everything you need. It goes on to say that you're not supposed to consider yourself of this world, and that this world is irrelevant, that this world is nothing compared to the next one, that it doesn't even matter. Yeah. The only purpose, I guess, according to Christian theology, is to give everybody a shot to chip in and try and get that, afterlife.
And a lot of Christians will use their own description that the world is such a horrible place in order to say, like, you need salvation because look at how horrible everything is, since they'll attribute the fall in Eden to literally tsunamis and say the reason that we have tsunamis today is, because we messed it all up, and that's why we have so many horrible tragedies in the world. It's because of our own sin brought this into the world, and they look at the world as a bleak and ugly place. Now, I'm not going to say that in everyday life this is their constant conscious view, but it's definitely a part of the teaching.
Yeah, and I said whatever I was specifically, I said that you questioned. I definitely believe it. Now, I don't think religion is necessarily all bad. What I think is that anything good you can get from religion, you can get from other places. Let's chuck the dogma. Let's chuck the guilt. Let's throw out everything that isn't demonstrably true. Keep the good stuff and improve society for everybody. Let's get rid of the divisiveness. The I'm right and I'm the chosen one and God's going to come and He's taken us, but you're a sinner and you godless liberals this and you heathens this and you Shia this and you Sunni that. Let's chuck all of that crap and worry about actually doing good for everybody. You can do all kinds of good without ever talking about religion or referring to God or anything else.
Well, okay. Well, you seem like a thinking guy, and that... honestly, to be honest with you...
Good, the program's working then.
Wait, I want to hear what he said.
I've passed the Turing test. I'm sorry, go ahead.
To be honest with you, what you said just kind of... I don't want to argue with you, but it just seems kind of contradictory to the question that I had. I don't think that you think that all religious people think of this world as a disposable thing. I mean, I know you made that statement.
I don't think every religious person thinks of it that way.
I knew you didn't. Okay, good. That's all I wanted to hear.
No, there's plenty of religions where... There's plenty of religions
where... I knew you didn't think that. Okay.
Not every religious person thinks any one thing.
Thanks. Okay, good.
No. If your question was about me overgeneralizing, yeah, apologize for that. That wasn't the intent.
Yeah, I probably phrased my question wrong, but it seemed like you were probably just speaking out of frustration. With a lot of these callers frustrate me too, so I understand that.
No, that's good. Well, at least we got that cleared up.
See ya.
Thanks, Lance. We got, is it Richard?
Yes, how you doing there, sir?
Good, how you doing?
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to speak to the overwhelming hypocrisy that I suffer daily when I'm listening to talk shows and just, every type of media. Christians, Jews, Muslims, it doesn't matter to me. That's a personal choice. But I'm just tired of every time something happens, oh, I'm only human. Oh, you can't judge me. Oh, nobody's perfect. If you're a Christian, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Jew, whatever you are in between, live the example. If the example was set, Jesus is the example. Being a Christian, no, you can't be perfect, but at least make the attempt. Sure. Don't always fall back on the number one excuse, you can't judge me. If your kid said that to you every time you caught him doing something, you probably had that kid locked away for 1,000 years. This kid's crazy.
But Dad, I'm not perfect.
Yeah,
nobody's asking for perfection.
All I ask is that you at least make an attempt to be a good Christian. So as your politicians say, oh, the Muslims did it. Okay, we got to fly across the world and go kill the Muslims. Don't examine nothing. Don't question nothing. Just do like my master said. It's like our politicians are a mess. I don't want to get political, but that's the number one problem we're dealing with right now is the politics behind religion. And they all seem to merge, but all I ask is that on a personal, individual level, if you say you're a Christian, you read your Bible regularly. Sorry, I'm probably talking too much. I see you.
I think you have a lot of energy, and it's kind of, it's just sort of nice.
Yeah, because I bummed everybody out there for a minute, so you're pumping us all back up. So
Right.
you were what were you saying again?
Yeah, I'm just very frustrated because I listen to talk shows all day, and all I ask is that even people in my family, if you're a Christian or whatever you are, I don't really care. All of them are there to be models of how to live. I would assume,
right.
Be a Hindu, whatever. Try to give you something to go on as far as how to govern your life. Well, but every time that that opportunity comes, sex, whatever it is, quick money, all of them throw away their conviction to their religion and go right for that carrot in their face. But yet they want to go kill somebody across the world who has a different religion than them. But they can't even practice their own religion. So what's the point? If you're a Christian, if you truly are devout, then make the effort to be that way. Quit being so hateful. Quit being so quick to believe a lie without examining it. Like the lady said, she lives on faith. And all you've asked her to do is to examine the reason she has this faith.
I was actually nicer.
Basically, somebody that needs to be put to death because you're an atheist or whatever you are. It's like, all you're doing is asking her to examine her beliefs.
Well, what I thought was really interesting about that caller was that she seemed to be negatively reacting to my claim that Christians believe based on feeling. And then when she started to explain why she believed, it was all about her feelings.
Right.
I'm like, well, what did I say?
Like taking your test like you're, and I'm not mad at the lady for, having her feelings.
Right.
Because she has her, but, it's like, okay, if you're stuck on your belief, then listen to the rules, you got 10 commandments, try to follow them. I don't see anybody trying to, from the Pope on, go across the board. You look at the History Channel, throughout the ages, all they had to do was stand out on a mountaintop or a podium and say, go get the enemy. All religious beliefs are dropped, all the love for God, all the self-examination. Oh, my leader said go kill the infidel or whatever. Right. It's like nobody practices their religion. I mean, in a good sense. A lot of people practice it in a bad sense. They do whatever. You know what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to rush through it. I know you run out of time. I'm just tired of the hypocrisy, though. I think you guys, as atheists, I don't think you have... Oh, sorry about that. Sound like you were trying to say something.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at your face, but I got my volume down. The synchronix is out. But anyway, all I'm asking people to do, people I deal with every day, is if you say you believe in something, then act like it. Don't tell me you're a Christian or whatever you telling me you are, but every time I turn around, you sneaking behind, doing this, and then as soon as somebody catch you doing it, you can't judge me. Oh, that's your answer? Well, God's going to judge you. Didn't you say God was going to judge you? Well, guess what? You don't do this in front of your preacher, your principal, a cop, a judge. So why are you doing it in front of God? He's the ultimate judge. And now you telling me in your argument that I can't judge you? I mean, these people aren't making any sense. All I ask is that they practice their religion. And quit being so quick to judge somebody else's religion and kill entire populations based on some false, doctrine or some religious code or some charismatic leader. Use your mind that you claim you're using. Use your principles that you claim you got. Use Christ. He set the example. I ain't got nothing against Christ.
I do.
I just got something against his hypocrites that claim they follow.
I do.
You do.
I do, and I'm actually going to get to it. Thanks a lot for calling, Richard. Appreciate it.
Okay, have a good day, sir.
Yeah, Richard actually challenged our former caller a lot more than I would, because all I was asking her to do was to critically examine what she believes and why. And Richard actually wants her to live what her beliefs are. Now, Christ said some decent things, probably some good advice, and there's absolutely some horrible advice there, which we've already talked about a little bit last week in the Sermon on the Mount. I have problems with things that Jesus said. I have problems with the doctrine that finite crimes deserve infinite punishment, that one person could be punished for somebody else's crime, anything having to do with original sin. But there's nonsensical stuff in the dogma too, like sell everything you own and give it to the poor, and then, oh wait, that would make you the poor, wouldn't it? Yeah. You don't find Christians doing that. If they're going to live up to what they actually believe, the first thing they need to do is sell off everything they own. That's right there in the Sermon on the Mount, from the words of the person who they believe is God, and yet they'd much rather follow Paul.
And in Acts, they actually talk about that as a Christian tradition, that they would come to the apostles sell with the money. So everything they have, bring the apostles the money.
Yeah, so the apostles can divvy it up to the poor or whomever. All right, we got one more we'll try and get through real quick. BB?
Yeah, this is kind of a recurring question with me. It's a little bit off topic, but I remember hearing Madeline Murray O'Hare back in the 60s, and it seemed to me, as I was a UT student at the time, and it seems to me like that the atheist point of view tending, leading toward destruction of the idea of a concrete God was winning out. And along about 1960 or 70, I suppose, there was the big Time magazine headline, God is dead.
Right.
And, of course, the social revolution was going on at the same time, which was supposed to be grounded in reality and things that could be done more than just mythology. And so here I am, like 45 years later now, and I'm just constantly puzzled why they got turned back around. I was wondering if you had any observations, or maybe if you might make a show on that.
Some will definitely talk to you. I got to let you go because we're just about out of time. Thanks for calling.
Yeah.
We definitely have lost ground. We lost ground between, let's say, when Robert Ingersoll was speaking in the 1890s. We started getting this free-thinking society and good progression, and then we lost some ground. And then
McCarthy.
we lost in the McCarthy area. We covered it in the 60s. We lost it again. Hopefully we're recovering again, and maybe this time we'll hang on to it. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll be back again next week from 4:30 to 6. Appreciate everybody watching. We'll be down at Threadgill's here shortly. Any atheist or atheist-friendly persons welcome to join us. We'll see you next week.